Thanks everybody for being here. My name is Franny House. I am a full professor and department chair at the Oregon Institute of Technology, and now that I'm a full professor, I can write about whatever I want, and what I want to write about is Yoshihiko. So, my presentation is titled Yoshihiko is Bleeding, the People's Battle Doll and Meaning Making in Wrestling. So, who is Yoshihiko? Yoshihiko is a wrestler for the Japanese promotion DDT, a member of the roster since 2005, the current tag team partner of Mao, a human, and holder of the Banger Zone Wrestling Tag Team Championship since February of 2024, with at least 5 defenses. Yoshihiko is big in France. Banger Zone is Belgian wrestling, if you want to get into international promotions. Yoshihiko's had the DDT Ironman Heavy Metalweight Championship about at least 22 times, and this title was created as a parody of the hardcore title in WWE. It has a 24/7 defense rule, but instead of retiring it when the hardcore title was retired, they've continued to defend it, and it's changed hands, I think, about 1,800 times. Most recently, Yoshihiko had a storyline feud with Minoru Suzuki about his deep disrespect that he did not want to have a match against Yoshihiko, which reached a culmination at their WrestleMania week show in Vegas. Yoshihiko is at least materially real and human shaped. I would also say, in the words of my community, Yoshihiko is very gender. Uh, Created originally as a male character, the brother of Yoshihiro Sakai, who was also Muscle Sakai and now wrestles as Super Saiyan Dango Machine, a parody of Super Strong Machine, and has parodied over-the-top wrestling masculinity at various times. But depending on who's talking, he, it, or she pronouns, it varies quite a bit. And for some reason, when I began this research, I found fan sources describing Yoshihiko as Dutch, and in fact had the nickname the Dutch Badass. I did figure out why eventually. I also can't see I see chat is happening while I'm screen sharing, but I can't see your questions. I will go back and see them.
Mostly me going, yes.
And this is Yoshihiko. This is Yoshihiko entering the ring and in his corner for his match against Minoru Suzuki. And I took all the photos in this presentation. So you will see Yoshihiko. What is Yoshihiko? A wrestling character, I would say, portrayed by a series of inflatable and or stuffed sex dolls. People describe him as a blow-up doll, but that hasn't been true for a really long time. And I found out through Bo Ruberg's book, Sex Dolls at Sea, there's a term for a low-quality stuffed sex doll that's something like a body pillow, kind of like I think it's called a dakinamura, that's called a Dutch wife. In Japanese, it's Dutch waifu. So I was very surprised to find out Yoshihiko is a waifu. But that is half of why Yoshihiko is sometimes called the Dutch Badass in Japanese. The other half is that Yoshihiko used to have a parody of Undertaker's biker taker gimmick. So the American Badass, the Dutch Badass. And thus, Yoshihiko is an example of the notorious broom that any good wrestler should be able to have a match against, as goes either the quote from The Undertaker that Shawn Michaels could have a match against a broom, or just this idea that, well, of course, anybody should be able to do that. In matches, in narrative, at present, most of Yoshihiko's matches structure him as a fairly conventional fan favorite underdog. He is constantly underestimated, he gets violently beat up, and then, surprisingly, kicks out. And then often is severely injured, fights through that to a dramatic finish. Sometimes he loses, sometimes he wins. But these narrative structures are very familiar. I would venture Yoshihiko is also a technology for both satirizing and exemplifying the over-the-top extremes of wrestling, and in fact, making fun a little bit of fans' desire for violence. And as you can probably tell, one of my special interests. I am fascinated by edge cases, the exceptions that prove the rule, and non-human wrestlers are an example of that. So here's some more photos of Yoshihiko flying back into the ring after getting knocked out. So another important thing to understand the context for a gimmick like this is where is Yoshihiko? And the answer originally is DDT. This is a Japanese promotion that's currently owned by Cyberfights, is in a group with Pro Wrestling Noah and Tokyo Joshi Pro Wrestling. They describe themselves as Lucha Resu, that they are putting on a combination of Lucha Libre and Puro Resu that is has a stronger emphasis and frequency on comedy wrestling than most other promotions. They also frequently feature what I would describe as gay slapstick and naughty or sexual humor, along with more serious matches and storylines. So if you have a hard time imagining Minoru Suzuki being in like the gay comedy wrestling promotion, it's been interesting. As I mentioned with their Iron Man Heavy Metalweight Championship, they have a history of parodying things going on in other top tier promotions and then taking it to the extreme and just never giving up the joke. I want to give them credit for innovative, campy comedy wrestling. I think they are um, they've introduced a variety of unusual gimmicks that I think push the boundaries of what's possible with the art form. And I think it's also interesting to note, at least at present, they have a very heavily female audience. It's very clear from watching who's in the audience at their shows that a lot of this is unfolding for the female gaze. So here's the meme I said I was going to add based on the other presentation. So this is from Tumblr user Dilf in Peril, and it is a bell curve of the wrestling understander score. The person who doesn't understand says, "Oh my God, this is so gay." The person who's in the middle of the bell curve is like, "Well, actually, that's just a normal submission. And he's painting him like that to make it harder to kick out. He's actually not sniffing his pits, he's calling the match." And then on the far right end of the bell curve that this Tumblr user is venturing are like the true understanders. Yay. So I've highlighted a part of this bell curve where I think DDT typically lies. Yoshihiko is adjacent to all of that stuff. And I think certainly doing some very queer things with gender. So there are some challenges trying to even research factual, basic information about this character and this gimmick. He does give interviews, but is portrayed as refusing to answer questions because he can't talk. But those interviews are out there. He doesn't have an entry on cagematch.net because the website ontologically does not acknowledge that he is a real wrestler. Other websites that are less thorough do acknowledge him. There's only one scholarly source that mentions him, and the authors don't even agree whether he's animate. My Japanese also is poor. I am doing my best. And Yoshihiko didn't have an English language Wikipedia page until I made one this year and became America's #1 Yoshihiko scholar by virtue of being America's only Yoshihiko scholar. So, while trying to even research basic information to write that page, I found a bunch of things that have never been documented before, that I couldn't put in the Wikipedia article because you can't put original research in a Wikipedia article. And thus, I decided that this would be a good venue to present that research. So there are two eras of Yoshihiko's career, and most coverage of Yoshihiko focuses on the older matches, around the time of like the notorious Golden Lovers match. So the early period, Yoshihiko was pretty visibly an inflatable doll, and that's the era where he went through several gimmicks parodying over-the-top male wrestlers like The Undertaker, The Great Muta, and Hulk Hogan. Uh, there's a great bit where he dies mid-match and then gets to make a second entrance that's a parody of Biker Taker's like motorcycle entrance, except Yoshihiko is on a tricycle. Peak. And in these cases, the technology is operating because Yoshihiko is being moved by the opponents and the match seconds. So the people around the ring who also have a job of getting the audience out of the way for a crowd dive also help move Yoshihiko around. The later period, that's sometime before 2023 to the present, Yoshihiko is a stuffed doll. I'm gonna venture. I haven't poked the doll, but you can clearly see that it's not floating around like a balloon anymore. And at this point, Yoshihiko is developed more as an original character. The it he's had international appearances. And there is the appearance of an unacknowledged black-clad figure that I've seen referred to as Yoshihiko's mysterious shadow. And this figure, who you might have seen in the pictures I've shown, is also responsible for manipulating the doll and creating parts of the match. So this was one of my big realizations that I couldn't put in my Wikipedia article is that Yoshihiko's actually using Japanese theater and puppetry techniques to make these matches happen. So it first reminded me of bunraku, which is a form of Japanese puppetry that involves fully black-clad puppeteers, unlike something like the Muppets, where the puppeteer is underneath and has their hand up here. The puppeteers are just completely clad in black and fully visible, manipulating a puppet without strings or hand puppet. It's sort of just like a doll. And so Yoshihiko operates very much like a bunraku puppet, is being moved at present by a black-clad puppeteer in the same way. And in kabuki theater, there's a figure called a karoku, who is a stagehand dressed fully in black, including a black mask, and who's treated as if completely invisible. And in kabuki, sometimes the karoku is that the audience has been assuming they're not supposed to notice because the figure's in black, is actually revealed to be a ninja and stabs a character on stage. I am very confident in saying that Yoshihiko's shadow is operating like a Kuroku. Not only is the figure completely clad in black, more or less not supposed to be noticed, but every once in a while, the shadow does attack someone. So, for instance, one of Yoshihiko and Mao's tag team title defenses in BZW involved a surprise moonsault off of the turnbuckle by the mysterious black-clad figure interrupting the match. I will note the Shadow's identity is not public information, which seems to be operating like other masked characters in wrestling, except at least those characters are acknowledged as being there. So here's a couple of pictures highlighting the mysterious shadow or the Kuroku. So this figure carries Yoshihiko in and puppeteers him to matches during the entrances. And so on the left is Mao, Yoshihiko, and the Kuroku getting ready for their BZW tag team defense. On the right is an unusual scene of the Kuroku being unable to reach Yoshihiko to interfere in the match and expressing distress, which I was excited to get a picture of. In these matches, everyone has to participate in maintaining the fiction. The opponents have to sell either a win or a loss. And I will note, super kicks, receiving a super kick by Yoshihiko sounds exactly the same as getting super kicked by anyone else because the wrestlers are slapping their thighs in the same way, which is kind of a startling reminder of the artificiality of the human versus human matches we're more used to. The referees participate, the commentators have to participate, and the fans participate. I think this is really in line with the previous presentation about fans being semi-fictional characters, because if the fans don't buy it, it would fall flat. But the 4 Yoshihiko matches I got to observe in person, as well as the media I've consumed in recording, Yoshihiko's pretty over. that in fact, it seems like the majority of fans are excited to participate in this fiction. In the 4 matches I observed, I only noted one fan loudly disbelieving the illusion. One guy at BZW, and he was drowned out by the rest of the crowd. And this is the same for any other wrestler. If these parts of the match don't work for a human wrestler, the fiction would fall apart. And it's maybe less different than you would think for Yoshihiko. Here's just a couple more pictures of Suzuki versus Yoshihiko. Yoshihiko getting his head slammed into the ring post and receiving a very dramatic big boot in the corner. So I would venture you could also call Yoshihiko a technology, a relatively consistent tool for solving a problem. And maybe that problem is human wrestlers are fragile. So some of the technological affordances of Yoshihiko include he can't die, but he can be destroyed for dramatic effect. So in the early era, Yoshihiko's head was popped in a match with Antonio Honda, which honestly I think is pretty disturbing. Uh, he can't really be injured, but in fact, he can only acquire worked injuries for dramatic effect. So, for instance, his torso burst open to spill stuffing and kayfabe organs, and he also got shot with a gun in Yoshihiko and Don Shokudino versus the Golden Lovers from 2009, which is probably Yoshihiko's most famous match. So I would say this Yoshihiko fulfills audiences' desire for violence, and they're reveling in over the top violence while poking fun at it. That is this what you want? Is this it? And so here's a couple examples of Yoshihiko regularly being flung into the audience in ways that would be seriously damaging for a human wrestler. In fact, Yoshihiko on the left was flung into my own seat. You can see the sign sitting on the chair. That was my seat. And Yoshihiko donning the crimson mask. Yoshihiko is in fact bleeding. I named this paper Yoshihiko is bleeding before I knew I would see it. So during the Suzuki match, Yoshihiko was kicked out of the ring, and while out non-visible, did the doll equivalent of blading, and slowly the puppeteer clawed Yoshihiko back up into the ring, and the cameras were able to catch the blood, which was pretty dramatic at the time. This is maybe less important of a piece of the technology, but it's also not documented anywhere. Yoshihiko's wrists are Velcro. They can be attached to each other so the doll can maintain holds. If you want his legs to be attached together, it seems like people typically tie them into a knot. FYI. And in this shot, you can see Yoshihiko's wrists are Velcroed together to maintain a hold on Suzuki in exactly that way. And the blood is seeping into the doll all over the place. So let me talk about Yoshihiko as a broom in an affectionate way. I find that the expression, a good wrestler should be able to have a good match against a broom, is kind of like the saying, my kid could do that, or I could do that about contemporary art. I would say, okay, so go out there and do it. I think these are very interesting creative matches, and I'm excited to see them. It would be weird if every match was like this, but I think they have merits. I would also say not all broom matches are alike. Yoshihiko works somewhat differently from other non-human wrestlers, like the Invisible Man, in line with Japanese theatrical techniques. And I think DDT deserves some credit for that innovation. In agreement with Hubert Vigilla's 2022 essay comparing non-human wrestlers. And these non-human gimmicks can grow and change over time. So, in conclusion, who needs actor network theory or thing theory when you have kayfabe? These are a couple of examples of academics going to great lengths theoretically to justify considering an inanimate object as having agency or imagining it as if it were animate to take its perspective. And from a wrestling perspective, my thought is why would I adopt that perspective? Within wrestling, we can our consensual our consensual reality can easily take that position on. I would say kayfabe is a durable enough rhetorical fantasy to hold up even air. Thank you. These are my references. And just in case you're curious, I did get Mao and Yoshihiko's autographs.
Yes. But did you poke it?
I did get a fist bump.
Okay. Because we were just discussing how awesome of a paper title that would be. It's like, I didn't get to poke. Well, what was it? I'm scrolling
I
up.
didn't get to poke the doll.
I haven't poked the doll. Yeah, that would be a great paper title. That was like ... yet. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is awesome. We've just been in the chat, just loving all of this, and everything, like David's saying, is just coming together, like all of the connections. Because there were points about bringing back Adam's talk about the audience connection and how that engagement kind of plays into this, and I just thought that was such a great point, about the everybody taking place and co-creating the fantasy, and extending that for a very long period of time. That was Melinda's comment. I don't know if you have another one to extend on that, Melinda, or if you want to respond quick, Franny.
No, I loved Adam's talk. I really was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what's happening here. If the audience isn't on board, it's definitely going to fall flat. But I got to see 4 where the audience was completely on board.
Where was it again?
So BCW had their first show in the United States, Thursday of WrestleMania week, at Swan Dive. And then DDT had their own show. There was a DDT versus TJPW versus GCW. And then there was the GCW Clusterfuck Battle Royal. I think last year Yoshihiko was in the final 3 of that, but was entered early and was eliminated fairly early. But it was definitely a clusterfuck.
Right on. I'm so mad because I live in Vegas and I didn't get to really attend anything. So just a couple of parties, but I was like, nah. But no, this is awesome. We had one more presentation lined up from Jonathan Ford, but I don't think he's here, and nor have I seen him. So you might have just, closed us all the way out. Are there any other comments or questions from the audience before 6:30 a.m.? Ooh, Lord. Why? Damn, you're committed. Ugh. You're a friend of his. Well, Jonathan, you're talking about, Mark? Yeah, well, tell him sleeping is overrated. Oh, yes, Carolyn, what you got in here? What are you sending people? Let me click to download. What is this? Oh, ooh, wrestlers, fans, and power dynamics at live events. Annette Hill. What year is this? 2019.
Yeah, that's like from a couple of years ago. The book that Chris and I edited, and in it is also my chapter on the co-constructive nature of kayfabe. And so I want to make sure people have it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Mark, yes, give Jonathan shit for us. Otherwise, you guys have been absolutely phenomenal. And AC, yes, please, plug all the things. That's what this is for, supporting each other. So AC, I know you wanted to say something with your sick voice.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your understanding. Look, last year I completed a dissertation at Saarland University in Germany, which the title of it is Getting Over the History, Industry, Performance Art, and Cultural Impact of American Professional Wrestling. And It's pretty broad. It covers a lot of the topics that came up today. Everything from kabuki theater to the origins of pro wrestling as an Olympic sport, as well as performance theory and a whole litany of other stuff. It is, to the great pain of my former advisor, 730 pages long. And it is available for exactly free. And I thought before I have to put a commercial edition of it out here in the US, I'll post it for everybody here to enjoy and use. And please pirate, just throw in a citation, even if a winking one, because that'll make me feel like those 4 years of research was worth it. So there, I put in the chat a link to the abstract, and a second link to the thing itself. It's 4 extremely long chapters. Chapter 1, wrestling as theater, including some stuff about the performativity of Americanness in and of itself. Chapter 2 is the craft of the work that gets into the structuring of matches and storyline in 3, 7, and 9 act structures. Then chapter 3 is the presence of professional wrestling in American pop culture and sports culture. And chapter 4 is an analysis of all that other stuff. And chapter 5 is a really detailed, in-depth subcultural history of American pro wrestling over the past 150 years. So please feel free to cannibalize this thing to your heart's content and enjoy if you want to.